the Grifols family fits most strongly into the category of entrepreneurial legacies. Their wealth came from building and operating a specialized medical business across multiple generations, rather than from inheritance, politics, entertainment, or financial speculation. Over time, the family transformed a small laboratory operation in Barcelona into one of the world's major plasma medicine companies. But the path was gradual, technical, and closely tied to the evolution of modern healthcare. The story begins in Barcelona in the late 1800s, when laboratory medicine was becoming increasingly important to hospitals and physicians. Josep Antoni Grifols trained as a physician and clinical laboratory specialist at a time when medicine was shifting from general observation toward measurable biological testing. Blood analysis, microbiology, diagnostic reagents, and laboratory preparation were becoming essential parts of modern healthcare, and he recognized that reliable laboratory services could become a durable business. In 1909, he founded the original laboratory business that eventually evolved into Grifols. The early company was small and specialized. It focused on clinical analysis, diagnostic support, and laboratory materials rather than mass pharmaceutical manufacturing. The business depended on precision, medical trust, and relationships with physicians. At the time, Spain was not a dominant center of pharmaceutical innovation, so building a scientific company in Barcelona required local credibility, technical discipline, and steady execution. The family's early advantage came from specialization. Instead of trying to compete across the entire pharmaceutical industry, the company concentrated on blood analysis, biological materials, and laboratory systems. These areas required expertise, but they also created stable institutional relationships. Hospitals and physicians tend to remain loyal to suppliers they trust, especially when products affect patient safety and diagnostic accuracy. The second generation inherited more than ownership. They inherited laboratory knowledge, medical relationships, supplier networks, and a culture built around scientific seriousness. José Antonio Grifols Lucas became one of the key figures in moving the business beyond routine laboratory work and deeper into transfusion medicine. Under his generation, the company became more closely tied to blood banking, plasma processing, and biological therapeutics. That transition mattered because blood plasma eventually became the center of the company's identity and economics. By the 1940s, the company was helping develop blood bank infrastructure in Spain and building expertise in plasma processing. Plasma medicine was not a normal pharmaceutical business. It required donor systems, cold storage, biological separation, transportation logistics, quality controls, and strict medical oversight. The operational requirements were difficult, but that difficulty became part of the opportunity. The family gradually built capabilities around plasma collection and plasma-derived therapies for immune disorders, bleeding disorders, and hospital critical care. The business became less dependent on any single product and more dependent on integrated infrastructure. Competitors could develop similar therapies, but recreating plasma collection networks and processing systems required years of investment and regulatory approval. The company expanded during a complicated period in Spanish history that included civil war, dictatorship, and economic transition. Many family businesses remained domestically focused and vulnerable to political instability. Grifols increasingly moved toward international medical markets instead. Healthcare demand also proved more resilient than many other sectors because hospitals, transfusion systems, and biological therapies remained necessary regardless of broader economic conditions. Over time, the company evolved from a laboratory supplier into a vertically integrated plasma business. It collected plasma, processed biological material, manufactured therapies, distributed products internationally, and maintained relationships with hospitals and regulators across multiple countries. As the company grew, later family members were prepared less like passive heirs and more like internal operators. They were expected to understand the business, its science, its manufacturing systems, and its regulatory demands. This created a family culture that was private, technically focused, and closely tied to the company's operations. Raymond Grifols was part of the generation that helped modernize and internationalize the company as it moved beyond its Spanish base. His role was important in the broader transition from family laboratory enterprise to international healthcare company, helping support the professionalization and expansion of the business during a period when plasma medicine was becoming more global and capital-intensive. The United States eventually became central to the company's expansion strategy. American plasma donation systems operated at much larger scale than most European systems, and the family recognized that controlling plasma supply would become strategically important. Grifols expanded aggressively into plasma collection centers across the United States, which strengthened the company's manufacturing capacity and long-term market position. This phase changed the family's role inside the company. Earlier generations had operated more like founder scientists and industrial builders. Later generations had to manage a multinational healthcare company exposed to acquisitions, financing, public market scrutiny, regulation, and global logistics. Thomas Grifols and Victor Grifols became the most visible modern family leaders during this global expansion period. Both were prepared through long exposure to the company rather than entering as outsiders. Thomas eventually served as chief executive officer and later executive chairman, helping oversee international expansion, plasma collection growth, and major acquisitions. Victor served in senior governance and chairman roles, helping preserve family influence and continuity as the company became larger, more regulated, and more global. The business became more acquisition-driven during the late 20th and early 21st centuries. The family used acquisitions to expand internationally and consolidate plasma-related operations. One of the largest turning points came with the acquisition of Tailcris Biotherapeutics in 2011. That deal strengthened the company's American presence and expanded its scale in plasma medicine, but it also increased debt and operational complexity. This introduced a recurring tension for the dynasty, maintaining family control while financing a business that required larger and larger global investments. As the company grew, governance became more scrutinized. Investors and analysts questioned leverage, acquisition structures, and the balance between family influence and public market accountability. The plasma industry itself also faced periodic pressure involving regulation, reimbursement, donor economics, and biological safety concerns. The HIV crisis in the broader blood products industry during the 1980s permanently changed how plasma businesses operated. Safety protocols, viral inactivation systems, and regulatory oversight became much stricter. Companies that survived long-term had to invest heavily in quality control and manufacturing reliability. Grifols adapted by expanding safety systems and industrial processing capabilities, though the industry as a whole became more demanding afterward. The family's wealth increasingly came not from a single breakthrough product, but from control over infrastructure that was difficult to replicate. Plasma collection centers, donor networks, fractionation facilities, regulatory approvals, hospital relationships, and manufacturing expertise all reinforced one another. The company became embedded in a specialized area of healthcare that required long investment cycles and substantial operational coordination. By the newer generation, the family's role shifted even more towards stewardship and governance. Victor Grifols Dieu represents this later stage of the dynasty, where the family's task is less about founding or personally building the business from scratch and more about maintaining influence, ownership continuity, and board-level direction inside a large public biotechnology company. The family also remained relatively private compared to many billionaire dynasties. Their identity stayed tied to medicine, manufacturing, and healthcare infrastructure rather than luxury branding or public celebrity. That culture helped reinforce continuity, but it did not remove vulnerability. Large acquisitions increased financial pressure. The company's dependence on plasma supply chains exposed it to regulatory and operational disruptions. Public scrutiny increased as the business became larger and more international. In recent years, the company has faced criticism over governance, debt, and financial reporting concerns, forcing restructuring efforts and asset sales. Even so, the family remained connected to the company after more than a century of operation. Today, Grifols operates as a global plasma medicine and biotechnology company with activities spanning plasma collection, immunology therapies, hospital products, and diagnostic systems. The business is far removed from the original Barcelona laboratory, but its core logic remains similar. It still depends on technical specialization, institutional trust, regulatory discipline, and infrastructure that takes years to build. The long-term outcome of the dynasty was shaped less by sudden breakthroughs than by persistence and operational continuity. Josep Antoni Grifols Roig created the Medical Laboratory Foundation. José Antonio Grifols Lucas helped move the company into blood and plasma medicine. Raymond Grifols helped support modernization and international expansion. Thomas and Victor Grifols scaled and institutionalized the company during its global plasma era. Victor Grifols' due represents the newer stewardship phase, where the family's challenge is preserving influence inside a complex, public, international biotechnology company. What made the family durable was not public glamour or rapid diversification. It was their ability to stay close to a difficult, highly regulated medical industry across changing eras of healthcare. Over time, the company became more complex, global, and financially demanding, but the family continued adapting without fully stepping away from the enterprise it had built.